Revenge with Karen.
The conference room smelled like aggressive cologne and desperation. You know the scent? It's that specific mix of eau de nepotism and the ozone stink of overheating laptops. I was sitting at the mahogany table, the one I'd personally argued we couldn't afford 5 years ago when we were coding out of a basement in Georgetown, watching Derek pace back and forth like a tiger that had been raised on Adderall and TED talks. Derek, the founder's son, man who thought the cloud was something you could literally touch if you stood on a tall enough ladder. I'm Harper. I'm the lead systems architect. Or rather, I was the person who knew where all the digital bodies were buried because I dug the graves myself. I'm 45. I don't dye my grays because I earned every single silver strand debugging race conditions at 3 a.m., and I have zero patience for corporate theater. If you're into stories about corporate train wrecks and the people who survive them, go ahead and hit follow button or whatever, because this ride is about to go off the rails, and I'm driving the getaway car. Seriously, stick around, it gets worse. We need to talk about velocity, Derek said, stopping to admire his reflection in the pristine glass wall. He was wearing a vest that cost more than my first car. We need to talk about trimming the fat. The room went silent, kind of silence where you can hear the hum of the HVAC system and the collective spiking of blood pressure. There were 12 of us in the room. Engineers, product leads, data scientists, people with mortgages, people with kids who needed braces. And Derek, fresh out of an MBA program that apparently taught him that human beings are just rows in a spreadsheet you can delete to make the margins turn green. I took a sip of my lukewarm coffee, tasted like battery acid. Derek, I said, my voice scratching the air, our velocity is fine. We just shipped the Q3 update with zero downtime. The architecture is stable. If you trim the fat now, you're going to cut into the muscle. He turned to me. The look in his eyes wasn't just dismissive, it was bored. It was the look of a man who had already made up his mind while playing golf on Tuesday and was just going through the motions of pretending to care on Thursday. Harper, he sighed, like explaining gravity to a toddler. That's the problem. You're obsessed with stability. We need disruption. You've built a fortress, sure, but we need a speedboat. And frankly, your stack is looking a little vintage. Vintage. I felt a vein in my forehead throb. I built the routing algorithm that cut our clients' delivery times by 18%. I wrote the redundancy protocols that saved this company's ass when the East Coast grid flickered last winter. I was the one who translated his father's incoherent napkin scribbles into a logistics engine that was currently valued at $40 million. Vintage keeps the lights on, Derek, I said, keeping my tone level. I learned a long time ago that getting angry in a boardroom just makes you look emotional. Getting quiet makes you look dangerous. You want to disrupt the architecture? Fine, but do it after the holiday surge. If you start ripping out load balancers now, the whole system goes dark. Derek smirked. It was a practiced smirk. See, that's the fear talking. We're moving to a new paradigm. Agile, lean, young. He paused for effect, tapping his fingers on the table, which brings me to the hard part. Harper, we're restructuring the architecture division. We're bringing in some outside consultants to modernize the stack, which means your role is redundant. The air left the room. My second in command, a brilliant kid named Ben, looked like he was about to vomit. He stared at me, eyes wide, waiting for me to explode, waiting for me to flip the table. Redundant, I repeated. The word hung there, heavy and stupid. We're calling it an evolutionary exit, Derek said, using a phrase that definitely came from a LinkedIn influencer with guru in his bio. Security is waiting in the lobby with a box. We'll need your badge and your laptop. Now, it was a power move, a public execution to show the rest of the pack who was the alpha dog. He wanted me to cry. He wanted me to beg. He wanted a scene he could recount over drinks at the country club. We fired the old guard to make way for the future. I stood up. My knees popped. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It was the calm of a demolition expert who knows the fuse is already lit, and everyone else is just standing too close to the blast zone. I looked at the whiteboard, covered in my diagrams, my logic, my life's work. You're firing me, I said clearly, mid-meeting, without a transition plan. Effective immediately, Derek said, checking his watch. We need fresh eyes, Harper. You're obsolete. Get out. I reached for my bag. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of a fight. If he wanted to burn the house down, I wasn't going to hold the hose. I was just about to hand over my badge, my key to the kingdom I built, when my phone buzzed against the table. It wasn't a text, it was a call, and I never get calls during meetings. My phone was on silent. The vibration rattled the mahogany like a tiny earthquake. I looked down. The screen lit up. The caller ID didn't say spam risk or mom. It said Uber VP Engineering. I stared at it. I knew him, Marcus. We'd met at a conference in Seattle 3 years ago. We'd stayed in touch, trading war stories about scaling databases. He'd been trying to poach me for 18 months, but I'd always said no. I was loyal. I was the architect. This was my building. But now I was redundant. The phone kept buzzing. Derek looked annoyed. Turn that off. You can take your personal calls in the parking lot. I looked at Derek. I looked at the team, the terrified faces of the engineers who knew exactly what was about to happen to their workload. Then I looked back at the phone. A twisted, dark thought bloomed in my mind. It was unprofessional. It was petty. It was absolutely perfect. I didn't decline the call. I didn't silence it. I swiped green. And then, maintaining dead eye contact with the man who just called me obsolete, I pressed speaker. "This is Harper," I said. The voice that filled the silent boardroom was crisp, loud, and unmistakably desperate. "Harper, thank God," Marcus's voice boomed. "Look, my HR team just got a ping on your LinkedIn status update. Did you just toggle to open to work? Because if you did, I need you. Drowning on this geofencing integration, and your paper on spatial indexing is the only thing that makes sense. I can get the offer letter over in 10 minutes. Double your current base. Full equity. Name your signing bonus. Just tell me you're free." The silence in the room changed. It shifted from the silence of a funeral to the silence of a bomb squad watching a wire get cut. Derek's smirk faltered. His brow furrowed. He looked at the phone, then at me. Clearly didn't understand what was happening. He thought it was a prank. He thought I was bluffing. "Is this a joke?" Derek laughed, a nervous, barking sound. "Who is that?" "It's Uber, Derek," I said, my voice ice cold. "The competition." "Take it," Derek sneered, doubling down on his stupidity because his ego wouldn't let him back up. "If they want my scraps, let them have them. Go ahead, take it." Marcus, on the other end of the line, heard him. "Harper, who is that? You in a meeting?" I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf that just found the fence unlocked. "Marcus," I said, loud enough for the back of the room to hear. "I'm sitting with the COO of my current company. He just informed me that I'm obsolete. He says you can have me." He said, "What?" Marcus asked, genuine shock in his voice. "He said take the offer," I replied, never looking away from Derek. "So, Marcus, send the doc." For a solid 10 seconds, only sound in the room was the hum of the overhead projector cooling fan, sounding like a dying lung. "Send the doc," I had said. "Sending now," Marcus replied instantly. "Check your personal email. And Harper, I'm not kidding about the bonus. We need you in Seattle by Monday if you can swing it. I'll expense the relocation. Just don't sign anything with those clowns until you see our numbers." "Understood," I said. "I'm hanging up now, Marcus. See you on the other side." Said, the line clicked dead. I set the phone down on the table. The screen went black, reflecting Derek's face. He looked like someone who had just swallowed a bee, but was trying to pretend it was a breath mint. His brain was trying to process 2 contradictory pieces of data. 1, Harper is a dinosaur who needs to be fired. And 2, one of the biggest tech giants in the world just offered to back up a money truck for her in less than 30 seconds. Derek chose option 1. Denial is a hell of a drug, especially when your daddy pays for the prescription. "Well," Derek scoffed, adjusting his cuffs. "That was theatrical. Did you set that up? Have your little boyfriend call and pretend to be a VP?" My jaw tightened. "Marcus is the VP of engineering at Uber, Derek. You can Google him. You could check the attendee list of the TechCrunch Disrupt panel you were supposed to speak at last year, but skipped because you were networking in Ibiza." Ben, my second in command, finally spoke up. His voice was trembling. "Derek, that was Marcus Lynn. He wrote the white paper on distributed hash tables. If he's calling Harper, it means nothing." Derek snapped, slamming his hand on the table. The cheap monitor shook. "It means she's good at networking. Doesn't mean she can code for the modern web. We need React Native rock stars, not whatever legacy backend mess she's been hoarding." Ding. My phone lit up again. An email notification. Subject, offer letter, principal infrastructure architect. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I just let it sit there, glowing. Legacy backend mess, I repeated slowly. That mess processes 40,000 transactions a second, Derek. It handles the routing logic for your entire fleet. It's not a mess, it's a cathedral, and you're kicking out the stonemason because you want to put up drywall. We have documentation, Derek waved a hand dismissively. We have the wiki. We have the code comments. Anyone can pick it up. Any junior dev fresh out of boot camp could run this system. I looked at Ben. Ben looked at the floor. We both knew the truth. Wiki was 3 years out of date because Derek had cut the budget for technical writers. The code comments were cryptic notes I wrote to myself at 4 a.m., mostly referencing inside jokes and heavy metal lyrics that doubled as encryption keys for my logic flow. Is that so? I asked. You think the documentation is sufficient? I know it is, Derek sneered. I've seen the folders. It's all there. Now, hand over the laptop. Security is waiting. One of the engineers, quiet girl named Sarah who handled the API gateways, raised her hand. She looked terrified. Derek, the encryption keys for the erratic load-shedding protocols. Are those in the wiki? Because last time we tried to patch the server without Harper, the whole database locked up for 6 hours. Derek turned on her. We will figure it out, Sarah. That's what I'm paying you for. This is exactly what I mean about a toxic culture of dependency. Harper has made herself a bottleneck on purpose to inflate her value. By removing her, I'm liberating you, liberating them. He was liberating them from the parachute right before kicking them out of the plane. I stood up, sliding my phone into my pocket. I could feel the heat of the battery. It felt like leverage. You're right, Derek, I said, my voice dropped dead calm. I have been a bottleneck. I've been catching every error, every bad commit, every catastrophic failure before it ever reached the client. I've been the dam holding back the flood. But if you want to be liberated, be free. I closed my laptop. It was a battered ThinkPad covered in stickers, Kubernetes, Linux, a faded I voted sticker from 2016. I unplugged the HDMI cable. The projector screen went blue. No blue screen of death, Derek mocked. I expected more drama. The drama comes later, I said, usually around 2:00 a.m. on a Saturday. I unclipped my badge from my belt loop. It was an old badge, the photo taken 10 years ago when I still had hope in my eyes and less caffeine in my bloodstream. I slid it across the mahogany table. It spun, coming to a rest right in front of Derek. There, I said, I'm gone. You've got your wish. The fat is trimmed. Don't let the door hit you, Derek muttered, already looking at his phone, probably checking his crypto portfolio. I walked toward the glass doors. My heels clicked on the polished concrete floor, a sound that used to mean the boss is coming, but now meant the adult is leaving. Wait, Ben called out. He stood up, panic in his eyes. Harper, the master credentials for the AWS root account. The multi-factor authentication token. It's on your phone. I stopped at the door. I turned back. The whole room froze. Derek looked up. What? Root access? Ben stammered. It's tied to Harper's device. If she leaves, we can't push hotfixes. Derek rolled his eyes, so transfer it, right now. I looked at Ben. I looked at Derek. And then I remembered the contract clause Derek had made us all sign 3 years ago, a clause intended to stop employees from stealing IP, but written so aggressively it cut both ways. I can't, I said. What do you mean you can't? Derek demanded. Do it. Just fired me, Derek, I said, a small, cold smile touching my lips. My employment is terminated. Effective immediately, which means per company security policy, Section 4, Paragraph 2, which you wrote, I am strictly prohibited from accessing, transferring, or modifying any company systems. If I touch that root account now, I'm committing a federal crime. Corporate espionage. I'm authorizing you. Derek shouted. Can't authorize a non-employee to access root, Derek, I said. That voids your SOC 2 compliance certification. You'd lose your insurance. You'd lose the bank contracts. Then we'll figure it out. He yelled, his face turning a blotchy red. Just get out, we'll reset it. Good luck with that, I said. Support takes 48 hours to verify identity for a root reset. Hope nothing breaks before Tuesday. I pushed the door open. The air in the hallway felt cooler, cleaner. Goodbye, Derek, I said. Try not to touch the thermostat. Walking out of a building you helped design is a surreal experience. I passed the server room on the second floor, my baby. I could hear the faint hum of the cooling fans through the fire-rated door. It was a rhythmic, industrial purr that I had tuned perfectly over a decade. I knew which rack vibrated if the AC kicked on too hard. I knew which hard drive slot on cluster B was finicky and needed to be jiggled. It wasn't just hardware, it was an organism, and I had just been surgically removed from its immune system. People looked at me as I walked down the hall. They knew. News travels faster in a tech company than a packet over fiber optics. The Slack channels were probably melting down right now. Did you hear? Derek finally did it. Harper's out. We're doomed. I saw heads duck down behind monitors. I saw pity. I saw fear. I didn't stop to say goodbye. Goodbyes are for people who intend to stay friends. I intended to be a cautionary tale. I pushed through the main lobby doors, and the humid Washington air hit me like a wet towel. It was raining. Of course it was raining. The sky was the color of a bruised plum. My truck, beat-up Ford F-150 that I drove specifically because it annoyed Derek's Tesla sensibilities, was parked in the back. I threw my bag into the passenger seat. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline dump. I had just nuked my career of 10 years in under 20 minutes. I sat in the driver's seat, listening to the rain hammer on the roof. I pulled out my phone. The email from Marcus was still open. I scrolled down to the compensation package. Base salary, $320,000. Signing bonus, $50,000. RSU, 15,000 units, vesting monthly. Title, Chief Infrastructure Strategist. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was more money than I had ever seen on a single page. It was screw you money. It was I can buy a cabin in the woods and code from a hammock money. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the validation. Derek had called me obsolete. Marcus called me a strategist. A knock on my window made me jump. I looked up. It was Richard, the founder, Derek's father. He looked older than I remembered. His hair was wispy white, and he was wearing a cardigan that had seen better days. He held a golf umbrella, struggling slightly against the wind. Richard was a good engineer in the 90s, but he was a terrible businessman. He had handed the reins to Derek because he was tired, not because Derek was ready. I rolled down the window. Richard, Harper, he squinted at me through the rain. Leaving early, I saw the truck running. Is everything all right? He didn't know. Derek hadn't told him. Of course he hadn't. Derek operated in the shadows until he could present a sanitized version of the truth to his dad. I'm not leaving early, Richard, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I'm leaving for good. Richard blinked, water dripping from the rim of his umbrella. What? Did you get a better offer? We can match it. You know I was fired, Richard. I cut him off. Derek just terminated me, said I was obsolete, said my architecture was vintage. Richard's face went pale. He did what? We have the board meeting next week. The Q4 roadmap, who is going to present the scaling strategy? Derek is, I said. He's got some consultants coming in. Apparently, I'm the fat that needed trimming. Richard gripped the door handle. No, that's a mistake. I'll talk to him. Just come back inside. We'll fix this. I'm the chairman, for Christ's sake. I looked at this man who had hired me when I was 35, who had given me a chance when other tech bros thought a woman couldn't handle back-end architecture. I felt a pang of sadness. But then I remembered Derek's smirk. I remembered the word redundant. It's too late, Richard. I said I already accepted another offer. In the room, while Derek was firing me. Who? Richard whispered. Uber, I said. Richard physically recoiled. He knew what that meant. He knew they were our biggest competitor in the logistics space. He knew that if I went there, I wasn't just leaving, I was defecting. Harper, please. The non-compete, Derek voided it, I said ruthlessly. He fired me without cause. In Washington state, that makes the non-compete unenforceable. You should check with legal, but I'm pretty sure Derek just handed your playbook to the enemy. Richard looked like he was going to be sick. He turned and looked back at the glass building, his legacy, now being piloted by his idiot son. I have to go inside, Richard stammered. I have to stop him. Good luck, I said. And Richard, tell Derek that spaghetti code is what Italians call a masterpiece. It's what keeps the sauce from sliding off the plate. I put the truck in gear. I didn't look back as I peeled out of the lot. I turned on the radio. Some classic rock station was playing Burnin' Down the House by the Talking Heads. I cranked the volume. I drove toward the highway, toward Seattle, toward the future. Behind me, in the rearview mirror, the gray building grew smaller and smaller until it was just a smudge against the rainy sky. Inside that smudge, I knew the chaos was just beginning. Derek had pulled the pin. Now he had to hold the grenade. The first week at Uber was like stepping out of a submarine and into a luxury resort. My new office had a view of the Sound. The coffee was single origin and actually hot. My team, an elite squad of 12 developers who looked at my code like it was scripture, listened when I spoke. There was no mansplaining. There was no justification. I drew a diagram and they built it. It was intoxicating. I'd be lying if I said I didn't keep a tab open on my second monitor. Down Detector Com Mobility Tech, my old company, for the first 3 days, nothing happened. That's the thing about good architecture, it has inertia. A well-built system can run on autopilot for a while, even if the pilot is dead at the controls. It coasts. But on Thursday, the wobble started. It began with a text from Ben. We weren't supposed to talk, corporate espionage and all that. Ben was using a burner signal account. Ben, the load balancers are acting weird. Latency is up 400 ms. Derek told us to just reboot the clusters. Me, don't reboot, the cache needs to warm up. If you reboot during peak hours, you'll cause a thundering herd problem. Ben, I know, I told him. He said reboot it, it's just a computer. We rebooted. Now the database CPU is pegged at 100%. I sipped my latte and watched the little red line on Down Detector tick upward. A small spike in user reports. App is slow. Can't log in. I didn't reply to Ben. I couldn't. Helping him would be helping Derek, and Derek needed to learn that gravity exists. By Friday afternoon, the wobble became a shake. I was in a strategy meeting with Marcus, mapping out a new predictive arrival algorithm, when my old company's public status page updated. Status degraded performance on East Coast nodes. Looks like your old friends are having a rough day, Marcus noted, glancing at the screen. He wasn't gloating, he was just observing. In this business, downtime is blood in the water. They're rebooting the clusters, I murmured, staring at the metrics. They're trying to clear a memory leak that isn't a memory leak. It's a queue backup. How do you know? Marcus asked. Because I designed the queue to back up when the fraud detection API gets too aggressive, I said. It's a safety valve. If they reboot, they flush the safety valve. The fraud checks will fail open. Ouch, Marcus said. That sounds expensive. It is, I said. Back at the old office, as I later learned, it was pandemonium. Derek had brought in his consultants, 3 guys in Patagonia vests who specialized in agile transformation, but couldn't read a raw SQL query to save their lives. They were staring at the dashboards, which were flashing red, and throwing out buzzwords. We need to horizontally scale. One of them shouted, spin up more instances. Derek commanded, so they did. They spun up 50 new server instances. Here's the thing about the system I built. It had a hard-coded license cap on the third-party mapping API, a cap I had negotiated to save us money. The contract allowed for 100 concurrent connections. When they spun up 50 new servers, the total connections hit 150. The mapping provider's automated system saw the breach of contract. And, as per the terms I had warned Derek about 2 years ago, it instantly revoked the API key. Friday, 4:15 p.m. Every single driver on the platform lost their map. I saw it happen in real time on social media. Twitter exploded. At angry user, WTF, my app just went blank. I'm stuck in traffic and I don't know where I'm going. #mobility tech fail at driver Dave. I can't pick up riders. The map is gone. Support is not answering. Ben texted me again. Just one word. Ben, blackout. I sat in my ergonomic chair, watching the chaos unfold from the safety of the competition. I imagined Derek in the war room, screaming at the consultants, screaming at Ben, screaming at the screens. I imagined him trying to call the mapping vendor, only to realize he didn't know the account number, the password, or the name of the rep, because the rep's contact info was in my Rolodex, the physical one, which was currently in a box in my garage. Should we call them? Marcus asked, half joking. Offer to acquire them for pennies on the dollar. Not yet, I said, turning back to my code. Let them simmer. The weekend is just starting. I typed a few lines of Python, optimizing a route for Uber. It felt smooth, clean. Meanwhile, 40 miles away, my legacy was burning down, and the only man with a fire extinguisher was the one who had lit the match. Monday morning brought the lawyers. I expected them. When a narcissist fails, their first instinct isn't to apologize. It's to find someone to blame. And since Derek couldn't blame the servers for being disloyal, he blamed the architect. I was sitting in Uber's HR orientation, half listening to a presentation about health savings accounts, when my personal phone buzzed. An email from legal at mobilitytech.com. Subject, urgent. Demand for return of proprietary data / intellectual property. Miss Harper, has come to our attention that critical system documentation and administrative credentials are missing from company repositories. We have reason to believe you have retained these assets in violation of your employment agreement. You are hereby ordered to return all encryption keys, root passwords, and architectural schematics within 2 hours, or we will seek immediate injunctive relief and damages for sabotage. Sabotage. That was rich. Excused myself from the meeting and walked to the break room. I made a cup of tea. Then I opened my laptop and drafted a reply. I didn't need a lawyer for this. I knew their contracts better than they did. To legal at Mobility Techcom CC, Derek, Richard Deere legal team, per my termination interview or lack thereof. I was escorted from the building immediately. I was not given an exit interview, nor was I asked to perform a knowledge transfer. As per the company handbook, page 42, section 8, all company assets must be surrendered upon termination. I surrendered my laptop and badge. I retained nothing. Regarding the missing documentation, all documentation exists within the company's Confluence server. However, as I repeatedly warned management in Q1, Q2, and Q3, see attached forwarded emails, filing system requires specific tag-based queries to navigate because the search function is broken. If your current team cannot find the files, it is not because they are missing. It is because they do not know how to ask the library for the book. Regarding the encryption keys, these are stored in the Hardware Security Module, HSM, in the server room. Access to the HSM requires a physical fob. My fob was on the keychain I handed to security. If you have lost it, that is a physical security breach, not a theft. I am now an employee of a competitor. Any request for me to perform work, explain systems, or guide your team constitutes consulting services. My rate for consulting is $5,000 per hour, with a 10-hour minimum, payable in advance. If you wish to engage my services, please send a contract. Regards, Harper. I hit send. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Ben. Harper whispered, "Derek is reading your email. He's purple. Veins are popping. Is he going to pay the consulting fee?" I asked dryly. "He threw a stapler at the wall," Ben reported. "He's screaming that you encrypted the documentation on purpose." "I didn't encrypt it," I said. "I just organized it using the Dewey Decimal System of Logic, and he's trying to read it with a coloring book mindset." "Did they find the HSM fob?" "Yeah, it was in the box security took," and said, "But nobody knows the PIN." I paused. The PIN, the 6-digit code that unlocked the physical hardware keys for the entire kingdom. "Let me guess," I said. "Derek wants the PIN. He says if you don't give it to him, he's calling the FBI," Ben said, sounding terrified. "Tell him the PIN," I said. "I don't care. It's not my problem anymore." "What is it?" Ben asked, pen ready. "It's the date the company was founded," I said. MMDDI. Eric's birthday is the backup PIN. There was a long silence on the other end. "Ben, Harper," Ben's voice broke. "We tried the founding date. It didn't work. And we tried Derek's birthday. It didn't work either." I frowned. "That's impossible. I set those myself. Unless," then it hit me. A memory from 6 months ago. Derek had demanded a security audit. He had insisted on changing all the master pins himself, claiming that too many people know the old ones. He had walked into the server room, changed the codes, and then, "Ben," I said slowly. "Derek changed the pins in April. He said he wrote them down in his black book. You know, the moleskine he carries everywhere. The one he left in the Uber on his way to the airport last week," Ben asked. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. It was a dark, guttural laugh that scared the HR rep walking by the break room. "He lost the master keys," I wheezed. "Locked himself out of his own house and lost the only key." "So, we're screwed?" Ben asked. "You're not just screwed, Ben," I said, wiping a tear from my eye. "You're bricked. You have to reset the hardware. That wipes the data. All of it, oh God," Ben whispered. "I have to go, Ben," I said. "I have a meeting about building the future. Good luck with the history erasure." I hung up. I pictured Derek tearing apart his office, looking for a notebook that was probably currently being sold on eBay by an Uber driver who thought it was just a nice journal. The irony was delicious. The vintage architect was the only one who remembered where the keys were, but the modern disruptor had thrown them in the trash. In the tech world, nothing stays secret forever, especially when you have a dozen disgruntled engineers who just watch their stock options evaporate because their boss lost a notebook. On Wednesday, 2 days after the blackout weekend, I received a file via an anonymous Proton Mail account. No subject line. Just a video attachment labeled Board Q3 Emergency Session MP4. I shouldn't have watched it. It was technically confidential material. But I'm human, and I'm petty, and I wanted to see the fire. I put on my noise-canceling headphones, dimmed the lights in my home office, and clicked play. The video was grainy, recorded from a laptop webcam sitting low on a table, likely Ben's laptop. left accidentally open during the Zoom hybrid meeting. The board was gathered around the long oak table. Richard sat at the head, looking like a ghost. He had aged 10 years in 10 days. Derek sat to his right, wearing a suit that was too shiny, sweating through his shirt. Across from them sat the investors, the VCs, the sharks. Specifically, a woman named Alina represented the venture capital firm that owned 30% of the company. Alina didn't suffer fools. She ate them for breakfast. "Let me get this straight," Alina said, her voice tinny through the laptop speakers. "We have been offline for 72 hours. Our customer churn rate has spiked 12%, and you are telling me we cannot restore the database because it's a hardware issue," Derek stammered. "Legacy hardware. The HSM modules are antiquated. Modernizing them." "You lost the PIN," Alina said flatly. She didn't ask, she stated. "My technical auditor spoke to your sysadmin. You lost the administrative PIN to the security modules, Derek. You are locked out of your own encryption." Derek wiped his forehead. It was a transition error. When Harper left, Alina interrupted. "Yes, let's talk about Harper. I reviewed the staffing changes. You fired your lead architect, woman who built this proprietary stack, on the same day you initiated a major restructuring. She was resisting the new direction." Derek argued, his voice cracking. "She was a blocker. We needed velocity." "Velocity," Alina repeated. She picked up a piece of paper. "I have a report here." "Do you know where Harper is now?" Derek stayed silent. "She is at Uber," Alina said. "She started Monday. And according to my sources in the Valley, is already leading a team to implement a new predictive logistics feature." "Does that sound familiar, Derek?" "That's our roadmap," Derek whispered. "It was your roadmap," Alina corrected. "Now it's their product. Because you fired the person who understood it and sent her to the competition with a grudge, and I assume, a very thorough understanding of exactly where our system is weak. She signed a non-compete." Derek shouted, desperate. "Which you voided by firing her without cause." Richard suddenly snapped. It was the first time he had spoken. He slammed his fist on the table. "I checked with legal, Derek. You didn't even consult HR. You just threw her out. You gave away our castle and the architect who built it." The room went deadly silent. Derek looked at his father, betrayed. "I did it for the company, to modernize us." Alina stood up. She gathered her papers. "Derek," she said, her voice dangerously calm, "you didn't modernize us. You bricked us. I am calling for vote of no confidence, pending a full audit of the IP loss." "You can't do that," Derek said, standing up. "My family holds majority voting rights." Alina looked at Richard. "Richard?" Richard looked at his son. He looked at the chaos. He looked at the stock price ticker on the wall, which was bleeding red. "I abstain," Richard whispered. Derek's eyes went wide. "Dad, I abstain," Richard repeated, putting his head in his hands. The video ended. I sat back in my chair. The silence in my apartment was heavy. I took a sip of wine. It was a Cabernet. Bold, full-bodied, with notes of oak and vengeance. I didn't feel happy exactly. It's hard to feel happy watching something you loved die, but I felt balanced. The scales had tipped. I closed the laptop. My phone buzzed. It was Richard. "Richard, can we talk, please? Coffee, tomorrow." I stared at the text. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Part of me wanted to let them burn. But the architect in me, the part that hates inefficiency and waste, knew that this wasn't over. Me, 8 a.m., the Starbucks on 4th. Don't bring Derek. The Starbucks on 4th was neutral ground. Loud, crowded, smelling of burnt espresso and anxiety. Richard was sitting at a corner table, looking like a man who had slept in his clothes. He had a black coffee in front of him, untouched. When I sat down, he didn't even say hello. He just slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a check, a blank check, literally. Signed by him, drawn on his personal account with the amount line left empty. "Name your price," Richard said. His voice was raspy. "Come back, we'll fire Derek, we'll make you CTO, we'll give you 10% equity. Just fix it." I looked at the check. It was tempting. Not for the money, but for the power. To walk back in there, step over Derek's metaphorical corpse, and take the throne. But then I remembered the team at Uber. I remembered Marcus, who listened to me. I remembered the feeling of building something new instead of patching something old. "I can't, Richard," I said, sliding the check back. "Why?" Richard pleaded. "Is it the money? I can liquidate assets." "Harper, the clients are leaving. FedEx just pulled their contract this morning. They said our routing reliability dropped below 90%. If we lose DHL, we're insolvent." "It's not the money," I said. "It's the fact that I've moved on. And frankly, Richard, I don't trust you anymore. You let Derek run wild. You watched him dismantle the culture I built, and you said nothing because he was your son. Richard winced. I know, I failed. But the company, the tech, it's your baby too. No, I said sharply. It was my baby. Now it's just code. And right now, it's broken code. Can't fix the HSM modules, Richard admitted. The data is encrypted. The backups are corrupted because the encryption keys were on the same ring. We're looking at total rebuild. From scratch, it will take 6 months. We don't have 6 months. We have 6 weeks. He leaned in, his eyes desperate. Harper, you have the notes. I know you do. You have the logic in your head. You could rebuild the core routing table in a weekend. You wrote it. I took a sip of my tea. I could, admitted, but I won't do it as an employee. Then, as a consultant, Richard said, whatever you want, I thought about it. I thought about the vintage insult. I thought about the obsolete comment. And I thought about the ultimate revenge. Not destroying the company, but saving it for a price that would hurt. Okay, I said, I'll do it. I will spend this weekend, 48 hours, rebuilding the core routing logic so you don't go bankrupt. I will get your trucks moving again. Thank you, Richard exhaled, looking like he might cry. Thank you, what's the fee? I pulled a folded document from my bag. I had typed it up that morning just in case. $1 million, I said, cash up front. Richard blinked. $1 million, and I continued, I want the IP rights to the modular scaling framework I build this weekend. You get a license to use it, but I own the code, which means I can license it to others, including Uber. Richard's jaw dropped. Want to sell our core tech to our competitor? I'm building it, Richard, I said. If you want me to save you, I'm doing it on my terms. You get to survive. I get the patent. That's the deal. Richard stared at me. He looked at the check he had tried to give me. He looked at the desperate text messages flashing on his phone from the board. He had no choice, and he knew it. Okay, he whispered. Okay, do it. I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I'd had in weeks. Great, I said. Wire the money. I'll start Friday night. Oh, and Richard, tell Derek he's not allowed in the building while I'm there. I don't want his modern energy messing up my vintage workflow. The office was empty on Friday night. Security had been instructed to let me in and, more importantly, to keep everyone else out. It was just me, the hum of the servers, and $1 million sitting in my bank account. It was eerie. The place still smelled the same. Stale coffee and carpet glue, but the energy was dead. Cubicles were empty. Derek's office was dark, his director of operations plaque sitting crooked on the door. I sat at my old desk. They hadn't even cleared it off yet. My ergonomic mouse was still there. A post-it note with a doodle of a cat was still on the monitor. I cracked my knuckles, plugged in my laptop, and jacked into the mainframe. Hello, old friend, I whispered. The system was a mess. Eric's consultants had tried to patch the API failures with spaghetti code that looped back on itself. It was like looking at a wound that had been stitched up with dirty shoelaces. I didn't try to fix their mess. I deleted it. rmrf/consultant bullshit/ I started fresh. I pulled the logic from my brain, the spatial indexing, the load shedding, the vintage architecture that worked because it was built on math, not hype. For 48 hours, I lived in the code. I drank Red Bull. I listened to Metallica. I rebuilt the routing engine from the ground up, streamlining it, making it leaner, faster. It was better than the old version. It was a masterpiece. By Sunday morning, the sun was coming up over the Potomac. My eyes were burning, but the dashboard was all green. System status, operational. Latency, 12 ms. API connections, stable. I had done it. I had saved them, but I wasn't done. Opened the core library, the black box that handled the most complex calculations, and I added a comment, a signature, / architecture by Harper, property of Harper Holdings, LLC, / license to Mobility Tech, license revocable upon 30 days notice, / if you are reading this, Derek, you're welcome. I committed the code. I pushed to production. As the servers spun up, accepting the new logic, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from Uber. Press release. Uber Freight announces Quantum Route, a new predictive logistics engine. I smiled. The project I had started at Uber on Monday was launching today. The code I had written there was different. It was cloud-native, AI-driven, truly modern. The code I just wrote for Richard, it was solid. It was stable. But it was the past. I had just sold them a very expensive, very reliable spare tire. I was already building a jet engine for the competition. I packed up my bag. I took my old ergonomic mouse. I paid for it, after all. I walked out of the building. I didn't feel nostalgic this time. I felt like a contractor who had just finished a renovation on a house she used to own. It was a nice house, but I didn't live there anymore. I texted Richard, it's done. System is live. DHL won't leave. Money is in the bank. Goodbye, Richard. Got in my truck. The rain had stopped. The sun was shining. I was exhausted. I smelled like stale energy drinks. But I had never felt cleaner. 3 months later. The tech world moves fast. In 90 days, Mobility Tech, my old company, had stabilized. They didn't go bankrupt. They kept their clients. But they were no longer the innovators. They were the legacy option. The safe, boring choice for companies that liked old-school servers and didn't mind slower updates. Eric was gone, pursuing other opportunities, the press release said. I heard through the grapevine he was trying to launch a crypto-based dating app. I give it 6 months before he loses the passwords to the users' wallets. Richard remained as chairman, but the board had installed a new CEO, a boring, number-crunching woman from Oracle who locked down the budget and banned disruption. She calls me once a month to authorize the licensing check for my code. Always answer on the second ring. I like hearing the sound of my passive income. At Uber, I was no longer the new hire. I was the chief infrastructure strategist. My team had just shipped the quantum route feature. It was crushing the market. We were faster, smarter, and cheaper than Mobility Tech could ever hope to be. I was sitting in a glass-walled conference room in Seattle, a real one, not a rented facade. We were celebrating the Q4 numbers, champagne and paper cups. My phone buzzed, an email. From Richard subject, checking in Harper, we're seeing some degradation in the routing speed again. The new CEO wants to know if you'd be open to a retainer arrangement to optimize the code you wrote in October. We can offer. I didn't finish reading it. I looked at the young engineers around me. Bright kids, hungry, respectful. They didn't call me vintage. They called me boss. I looked at Marcus, was raising a toast. To the architect, he said, nodding at me. To the build, I replied. I looked back at my phone. I hit forward. To Uber Legal CC, my assistant message, please reply to this. Tell them my consulting rate has doubled, and send them a cease and desist if they try to modify the core library without a license extension. I put the phone down, face down. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't seeking revenge. I had moved past revenge, had achieved something far more dangerous. I had achieved leverage. I had built their foundation. I had watched them burn it, and then I had forced them to buy the ashes back from me at a premium. I took a sip of champagne. It tasted like victory. The AC vents hummed above me, a perfect, efficient, silent flow of cool air. I closed my eyes and listened to the system running. It was working perfectly. And this time, I had the keys.
And that's the story. Take care of yourselves out there. The world's unpredictable enough.